Welcome to Pastor Jerome TV. I'm your host, Pastor Jerome, and I just want to kind of give you three signs of a good church. Three signs of a good church, and the first thing is that the Word of God and prayer is the leader's priority. You remember in the book of Acts when Peter and the church was birthed, and Peter and John was going, and there arose a need that the widows had, and they needed finances and food, and so it was a big need. It was very important, and so they needed them to serve tables. They wanted the leaders to serve tables, but Peter said, we can't give ourselves to serving tables. They said, because we've got to get ourselves to prayer and to the Word. And if your church is the greatest, your leaders in your church is the priority, is that the Word of God and prayer are the keys, that's a beautiful church. Because, if anything starts to take priority over the church, raising money, traveling, buying the biggest cars and needing jets and all, if all that stuff becomes the priority more than the Word of God, it's not a good church. But any church that has prayer and the Word of God and as its pinnacle, as its turning point, well then, hey, that's a great sign. When your leaders are focusing on prayer and focusing on the Word, well then now that's a good sign that you're in a good church. That's very good, because nowadays people don't really want to focus on the Word. They want to focus on other things, but without the Word of God, the church has no direction. It's like a ship without a sail. It's like a bird without wings. It's not gonna fly. And then the next thing is affiliation. If your pastors, if your leaders in your church have good affiliations, in other words, the people that they're bringing in to speak in your church have good reputations and they have good names and there's no scandals tied to them, well then that's very good. Because a lot of times in these bad churches, they bring in people who just had a baby last year. They've been in scandal after scandal, and they still bringing them in. That's not the church you want to be a part of. Because what they do is they bring these people in to help pillage or rape the people of their finances. And then when you say, hey, didn't this dude just have a baby last year, and he's been in ministry for 20 years? Well, this dude is not a baby saint. This person is willfully sinning, and you're bringing him in. Why? Oh, because God forgive him. God forgave him. Well, then, you know what? You don't want to be dealing with a pastor who brings in people with scandalous reputations. You don't want to deal with that. And another thing about affiliations is, if your pastor is a part of a Greek letter organization, or your pastor is a part of that, well, then that's something that you don't want to be bothered with. You don't want to be bothered with someone making secret agreements and tied to some secret organizations, which is an entry into Masonry and Freemasonry, and all of these things are known as Satanist organizations. You don't want to be bothered with that. If your pastor is always associated with leaders and stuff who have a bad reputation, that's not good. But when your pastor has good associations, and if he doesn't have any associations at all, if your pastor can't find a person who is clean enough to hang around with him, well then cool. Like myself, I'd rather be by myself than to be bothered with people that I don't know what their reputation is, or they had a bad reputation. And we all know God forgives people, but there's some people that need to be held to a higher standard. But then, and then finally, if a church is financially prudent, if they have wisdom with the finances, and then they're open about you seeing their finances and where it's going, hey, that's a beautiful thing, because no one wants to put their money into a black hole and into a bottomless pit where you don't know where the finances are going. You want to know where the finances are going. If your pastor's only interested in, getting himself a car and riding in the finest car, that's terrible. But if the church is showing you where the finances are going, how they're going, and you're paying your pastor a salary, that's very important. It's very important that your pastor receives a salary. It's very important that you be a blessing to your man of God and to your woman of God. Paul talked about, he said, if I give you these spiritual things, then there's nothing for you to give me natural. So if I'm feeding you spiritually, it's nothing wrong with you being a blessing to me natural. And that's the will and the Word of God. Muzzle not the ox that treads out the corn. Don't muzzle the ox, because he's the one that's got that wheel going around to tread down the corn to turn it into bread. It's something you can use. So it's a wonderful exchange, and it's a kingdom exchange to be a blessing to your pastor. And if your pastor could show you in the church that they are doing well with the finances, and the finances are shown to the people, well then great. I had a brother in my church one time. He sold his house and he has a surplus of about $90,000. And he paid his tithes and he gave his offering to the church. And I know some of y'all don't believe in tithe. I'm seeing more and more videos that's trying to prove tithes is not biblical for the New Testament church. Whichever way you want to slice it, tithing or grace giving, you still should support the church. I'll break it down in some other video about tithing or grace giving. Whichever one you choose, you should still be supporting your church. But I had a brother try to give me, he got $90,000 and he wanted to give me some money. So he tried to give me the money. I was like, hey, what are you trying to give me this money for? Well, he said, well, I want to be a blessing to your pastor. And I said, okay, well, I said, did you pay your tithes? He said, yeah. I said, did you give an offering? He said, yeah. And so he said, I just want to give you this money. I'm not giving this to church. I'm giving it to you. I said, well, I'm doing good. I'm fine. I said, but as long as you took care of your obligations, the best thing for you to do is save your money up and be a blessing to your kids. Take your family on vacation. But if your pastors are greedy for finances, and then they'll try to use their spiritual influence over you. And so a lot of times you can't take advantage of people because they're gung-ho, they love your ministry, they're excited about the ministry and God in you, and you could end up taking advantage. But you have some shepherds that won't fleece the people, and they're protective of their sheep. So if your churches if you're part of a church that, number one, that the word and prayer is a priority for them. Number two, that they have good surroundings, that they have good affiliations. Wonderful. And then number three, if they're financially prudent, you're part of a good church. Now, this is not an exhaustive signs at all. I'm just giving you 3 points. But these 3 points are pinnacle. And if your church has these 3 points, you're part of a wonderful church. Don't worry about size. And don't even worry about children's church or youth church, because so many times, I feel like the youth needs to be a part of the regular congregation and start getting some of that mature word so they can grow. Instead of just having some church where your children are just getting babysat and they're not going to learn the word of God. So, but don't worry about the size of the church. If your church has these 3 signs, that they're giving themselves to prayer and to the word, that their affiliations, the leaders' affiliations is good, and that they're financially prudent, you're good. But let me say this to you, that in every church there's going to be some scandal. I'm not saying it's not, but the scandal shouldn't be in the leadership, because the church is open for the public, and people come in with all types of problems out of the public, and so those are my thoughts. I'd love your thoughts on this. So leave your comments or suggestions in the